This morning's Old Testament reading comes from Psalm 123. If you'd like to follow along in your pew Bibles, it can be found on page 572. The supplication for mercy, a song of ascents. To you I lift up my eyes, O you who are enthroned in the heavens. As the eye of servants look to the hand of their master, as the eye of a maid to the hand of her mistress. So our God looks to the Lord our God. So our eyes look to the Lord our God until he has mercy upon us. Have mercy upon us, O Lord, have mercy upon us. For we have had more than enough of contempt. Our soul has had more than its fill of the scorn of those who are at ease, of the content of the proud.
The next scripture reading comes from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25, verses 14 through 30, the parable of the talents. For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, but to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. The same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents, and see, I have made 5 more. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things, and so I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things, and enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid. And I went and hid your talent in the ground, and here you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap where I do not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers. And on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. But this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So today's reading, it's kind of a well-known parable. A staple in a lot of churches or sermons or understanding of basic biblical knowledge. For starters, though, I feel we should kind of understand just what exactly a talent is. You see, we today know talents as the gifts or abilities, whether it's to preach or teach or sing or fly from a trapeze. We all have different talents that we use and can usher out into the world. But a talent in this context, in this wage sense, is pretty significant for us to know. So, in this world and in Jesus' time, a talent as a piece of money was the equivalent to 15 years worth of wages. And that's just 1 talent. And so if you have 5 talents, that's the equivalent to 75 years worth of work. You better not lose that, right? Don't let it roll down the road. It's a pretty significant amount of change. And so when these workers received that, or these slaves received that, they received the different varying amounts. You had one that received 5, and one that received 2, and then the other 1. And so imagine the pressure on the person with the 5 talents. That's a lot of responsibility. Now, can you imagine how mad the master would be if you lose one of those talents or all 5 of them? That'd be quite a substantial, hard pill to swallow. And so you can think that he would have the most pressure. Then the one with the 2 would also have some pressure, but not as much as the 5-talent person. And then you have the one with a single talent, which still is a significant amount of money. That's still 15 years worth of work. A big chunk of change. And so you can imagine that the master has high expectations for them, giving them this responsibility and this money, and encouraging them to do something fruitful with it. So you have the 2 that invested, and then the one that just kind of buried it in the ground. And maybe he's the guy that started the whole saying that money doesn't grow on trees. I think he tried to plant it and hope a tree would grow, right? They get a money tree, master, I got you a money tree. But it's not uncommon in that time period for people to bury what was precious to them. And so if you had something that was of significance or a prized possession, you would, in fact, bury it and put it in the ground. So he understood his master. He said, you reap where you don't sow, you gather where you don't scatter seed. So he was a little apprehensive and nervous about his master. Now, what if he messed up this one talent that he was given? All would be lost. And so he did what he felt was passive and safe and just buried it in the ground. So in retrospect, maybe he should have invested it like the other slave did. But hindsight is always 20/20, right? It's always easy to say shoulda, coulda, woulda. But one could also stand how doing the investing might also involve some risk, right? Now, people really don't like risk all that much. It makes us feel a little uneasy. Well, in the financial world, there's a rule that some of us may have heard, and maybe others have not. It's called the Rule of 72. So basically, if you have an investment and are guaranteed a 5% interest rate, you divide that interest rate number into 72. And that'll tell you how long it'll take to double your money. So if you have, for example, quick math, if you have 5 talents, a 5% guaranteed interest rate, divide that in 72, it's 14 and a half. I did the math ahead of time, so I'm not doing this out of my head. That's 14 and a half years it would take to double your talents at 5%. And now if you want to get a little more aggressive and invest more or have a riskier investment, then of course that number can go up. You can double it a little faster, but you also risk losing some money, right? So it's a precarious little situation. But what do we do with that money? Now, how do we invest it, and what ways can we use find to use these talents appropriately? So with that risk, it kind of inhibits us a few times too, right? In life, not just with money. People are afraid about risk with money, but just in general. Has risk ever inhibited you from opening up your own business? That store you've always wanted to own? Or prevented you from writing that book you've always kind of just wanted to write and publish? Or prevented you from getting to know someone better just because you didn't know who they were afraid of the risk involved? Or maybe risk even prevents us from doing fun activities in life, like bungee jumping, skydiving, right? I don't advise those. There's a big risk with those. But maybe risk even prevents us from traveling. But what I don't want to see is the risk gets so big in our world that we just cloister ourselves in our homes. We're afraid to go to churches, restaurants, stores, public places, schools. The kind of life in general is just one big risk as it is, right? So sometimes we have to take that risk, like those slaves, and find ways to use our talents, or invest our resources, our finances, or our time, or our gifts. And so one of the greatest risks that I took in my life was actually following this sense of call to ministry. I had a strong calling from God that, yeah, I should be doing this. But very few things in this world do we know with absolute certainty, right? Now you could say, oh, this slave was definitely going to double his money, or this one was going to bury it in the ground. But until we get to the end of the journey, we don't always know exactly how we'll get there or what the road will look like. And that's a little scary, not knowing the risk that might be involved. But I find that God calls us to places of risk sometimes. That God encourages us and wants us to use the talents that we have been given to make this world a better place. You see, God challenges us, encourages us to grow, to learn, and yes, even maybe take some risk. It's almost as if God has these talents and says, here, my beloved child, take these talents. Use them in your life. Make yourself better, make your community better, your church better, your world better, by using these talents that I have given you. Don't just bury them in the ground and keeping them in your backyard. Share them with the world. Like I said, life in general just involves risk. Making use of whatever precious resources or talents that we have will naturally kind of test our mettle and our capabilities. That was very evident in watching the show last night. My palms got all sweaty, and my hands got a little nervous, and my nerves were going full force, and I wasn't even the one dangling from the ladder up high. But yet, here they were taking those risks and sharing their talents with the world. There was once a once popular show that I really enjoyed watching called Man vs. Wild. Did anyone ever see that show? A guy named Bear Grylls, he's an ex-special forces for the British Army or Special Services. And they would just drop him in the middle of the most remote locations in the world. It was amazing. He would go into the desert, get dropped with a backpack and like a hatchet, and find his way out of those situations. Now here is a guy that had such limited resources in the most dire of circumstances that he found a way to maximize his talents and get out of those tough situations. It was really fascinating to watch. So in the grand scheme of things, we have to maybe wonder, which slave do I want to be like? Do I want to be like the two slaves that invested and doubled their investment? Or do I want to be the slave that just buries his talents at home and keeps to himself? Or are we maybe kind of like Bear Grylls? We maximize what little resources we have in whatever ways that we can. Well, one thing I can assure you, and I've preached on generosity before, but it is true that great gifts can arise from generosity. We feel better about ourselves. Science has proven that we are in fact helping and making a difference in the world. And no matter how many talents we might have or might not have, and by adding our talents to the person next to us, we have a seemingly limitless potential. We can do so much with just a little, or we can do a lot with an astronomical amount. The point is, we can do a lot if we put our talents collectively together. According to Thomas Stegman, an associate professor of New Testament at Boston College School of Theology and Ministry, he has a completely different take on this parable that I thought was pretty eye-opening and unique, and I hadn't really heard this perspective on it before. But basically, he states how the master in the parable represents Jesus Christ, the Son of Man. The slaves entrusted with the talents symbolize members of the church. The departure of the master points to Jesus ascending to the Father through his resurrection, while his return is the eventual second coming of Jesus back to us again. The rewards and punishment indicate the final judgment. So implicit is the return of the master, and that brings about the fullness of the reign of God. Well, see, that's pretty unique. And I think Stegman might be onto something with his assessment. All throughout Scripture, we have different representations of Jesus Christ. And maybe he is that master. And saying, here, take this talent. Do with it what you want, but try to double the talents that I've given you. And try to get a good return on whatever investments you may make, whether it's in a church, in a person, in a community, in a world. You can make a difference. But it takes you and you alone to do that with yourself, with the church, or with others. So, in fact, this kind of goes back to our whole understanding of stewardship. Now, early on in Genesis and throughout the Bible, God calls us to care for the world, which means caring for other people. It means caring for the creatures that inhabit this place, taking good care of the finances so that we can maximize and help people with that, and doing what we can to make this world a better place for everyone that lives here. So with this concept in mind, perhaps we should ask ourselves this. If God was coming back tomorrow, would God be pleased with what we did with our talents, our resources, and our blessings that God has given us? Or would God be disappointed if we just bury it and hide it in the sand? Of course, no matter what we decide to do in life, there will be risk involved. But when it comes to giving and generosity, investing in a church and giving back to God is a worthwhile venture. And that's what God calls us to do. You're saying, again, by embarking upon this journey of generosity, we are bound to uncover unimaginable gifts. By knowing that we can be that positive beacon of hope, a light, love, and the Word. But we can make a difference in this church, in this community in which all of us live, in this great country of ours, and even in the world beyond that. But we have to invest those gifts and that generosity and those talents. We have to share them with both faith and hope. Yes, there might be some risk that's involved, but imagine the difference that we can make if everyone just gave their talents and we all collectively put them towards one unified purpose. In the financial world, those are called mutual funds. People that get coming together for a mutual interest to put it in a big pot to hopefully get a bigger return on their investment together, right? And so God's calling us to have that mutual interest in the church. To give to the church, to those in need, and to those around us. So now, sticking in that financial track, I'd like to propose a brand new rule of 72. This is Pastor Chris's kooky idea of rule of 72 that I just kind of made up this past week. So, there's 12 disciples, right? Yes? Yeah, okay, got that right. Now that has nothing to do with it other than the fact that there's 12 months in a year, right? So 12 disciples, 12 months. Now how many times does 12 go into 72? 6. Yeah, good job. You guys are doing great. So 12 goes into 72 6 times. So think of it, 6 opportunities each month to make a difference. To give your talents, or your resources, or your wisdom. I know that typically most months there's 4 Sundays in a month, right? So that's 4 easy opportunities to give right there. Financially or with your body and your own other talents. And then just think of 2 other ways throughout the weeks that you can give in some other way. Whether it's giving $2 to homeless pets like they asked me to do at PetSmart yesterday when I bought my cat food. Or whether you have a passion for children and want to volunteer at a school. Or a church. Or a community organization. Or whether you have a passion and desire and love and care for other people. And you can visit those that are in the hospital. Or those that are bound to their homes and have trouble getting out and seeing other people. So if you give each Sunday a month, it's only 2 extra times you have to find your way to give in Pastor Chris's kooky rule of 72. That's not so bad, is it? It's not overwhelming. I think God would be pleased if we were to enact something like that. Think, God, you've given me such wonderful talent. How can I give back? You know, Pastor Chris's rule of 72 makes a lot of sense. Just 6 times a month. And 4 of those will be in church on Sunday. Yes, I can do it, God. I want to be that slave that doubles the investment that you have given me. The blessings you have bestowed upon me in my life. The talents, the gifts that I have, the preaching, the teaching. I want to share all of that with others. But it takes an intentional focus, a motivation, an understanding, and a following of the new rule of 72. But I know we're all capable of doing just that. God's blessed us. Now let us bless God and others in return. Amen.